Hello, this is video lecture on Chapter 4. We're going to cover demand and supply schedules and graphs and understand the concepts from Chapter 4. Again, sometimes the camera will be on me, but most of the time the camera will be on the screen. I'll help you follow along. Let's get started then. When we look at demand, we'll look at competitive markets. And a competitive market means that there's a variety of buyers and sellers. There's not one single individual buyer or seller that can influence price. The law of demand is pretty clear. It says that the price of a good or service affects the quantity people plan to buy. The quantity demanded of a good or service is the amount that consumers plan to buy during a given time period at a particular price. And the law states that other things remaining the same, if the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded of that good decreases. If the price of the good falls, the quantity demanded of that good increases. So there's an inverse relationship. As one goes up, the other goes down. You can look at a demand schedule. Demand schedule is simply the list of the quantities demanded at each different price when all other influences on buying plans remains the same. So here's a standard chart, and it's all hypothetical, of a price in dollars, 1 through 5, and then the quantity demanded. And then with that information, a graph can be written, or a curve, and the demand curve is a graph of the relationship between the quantity demanded of a good and its price. Take a look at what that would look like. So here's the demand curve, going from here down to here. At the price of $5, 10 items are demanded. As the price falls down to $1, 50 units of that item are demanded. So we move from the left down to the right. Again, the market demand is the sum of the demands of all the buyers in the market. There's not just an individual, but a whole group of buyers and sellers. Changes in demand. This is a bit more complex. We often just think of price as affecting demand, but there's changes in demand and there's other factors that influence buying. A change in demand happens when a demand curve shifts. It can shift, that is, move either to the left or to the right. An increase in demand shifts the demand curve rightward, and a decrease in demand shifts the demand curve leftward. We'll look at some examples of how that would appear on a demand curve, but for now, there's 5 factors to keep in mind that change demand. It's the prices of related goods, that is, not just of the good being sold, but of related goods. There's 2 types of related good. One is a substitute. That's a good that can be consumed in place of another good, such as tea and coffee are often substitutes for one another. And a complement. That is a good that is consumed with another good. I'll bring that up on the screen so you can see it a bit easier. A good that is consumed with another good, such as sugar and coffee. A rise in the price of a substitute or a fall in the price of a complement increases the demand for the good. Another factor is income. A normal good is a good for which demand increases when income increases, and demand decreases when income decreases. An inferior good is a good for which demand decreases when income increases, and demand increases when income decreases. My, that's a lot to think about, a lot of words there. So you can think about perhaps as an inferior good as might be a used car. Not that all used cars are inferior, but in the marketplace, a used car commands less of a price than a new car. And when people's income rise, that is, they have more money, they're more likely to buy a new car. They have more money to spend. So when their income rises, the demand for used cars is going to fall. And vice versa. When people's income falls, they're going to look at ways to save money. They'll buy inferior goods like used cars to save money. Hope that's the case. Let's move on to expectations. If the price of a good is expected to rise in the future, the demand for the good today increases. It's an expectation. It's what people think might happen in the future. If expected future income increases, demand today increases. This is what people are thinking will happen in the future. The number of buyers. The larger the number of buyers, the larger is the demand. And preferences. Preferences, those are an individual's attitudes towards goods and services, such as if people like a good more, the demand for it increases. Those are the 5 factors, things to keep in mind. And really a simple way to think about it is that anything other than the price of the item will affect changes in the demand. That is, push the demand to the left or to the right. If it's price, it's just going to move up and down the demand curve. But other factors are going to push the demand curve to the left or the right. So what does that look like when there's a change in demand? Well, once again, a change in price results in a movement along the demand curve. So this is a change just in price. I got to emphasize this because it's a tough concept to think about what pushes this out to the right or to the left. Well, for now, just remember it's the change in price that will cause the movement along this line. It's a change in the quantity demanded. Then there's a change in those other factors that I just mentioned, the 5 factors that will push the demand curve out to the right or to the left. So in this figure, in the demand DO, demand D sub 0, right here, the original demand curve, there's a movement along that. From A here to price of $2 and a quantity of 40. Price goes up to $4, okay, and the quantity then drops to 20 units demanded. And then there's a shift of the demand curve from DO to the demand curve D1. That's a change in demand. There's a new curve here that's pushed out to the right. It's a change in demand, not a change in the quantity demanded. So understanding the difference between the change in demand versus change in the quantity demanded, that's crucial. It's crucial because a lot of the questions will ask you what happens to the demand or the supply curve. So you have to know the difference. The key point, the price of the good or service itself is the only factor that can cause a change in the quantity demanded. So again, if you're stuck with some of these questions, just ask yourself, is there a change in the price of the item here that's being described? If there's a change in the price, it's just going to be movement up along this curve. Everything else will be a change in the change in the demand, so we push to the right or to the left. We'll look at some examples in a bit. Take a look at these examples then. For the following scenarios, determine if there is a change in demand, that is the demand curve shifts, or a change in the quantity demanded, a movement along the demand curve. So example 1, the local hair salon raises the price of its haircuts. Is that going to cause a shift in the demand curve or movement along the demand curve? People purchase more new automobiles when their income rises. Sales of Pepsi rise in the face of a price hike for Coke. Purchases of personal computers increase when retail stores slash prices. So 4 questions there. You could jot down your answers. You could hit the pause button on this lecture, and you could draw the graphs, however you think they might shift or move up and down the curve. Done already? Well, the answers you should have gotten then look like this. For the hair salon, there's a change in price. So there's a change in the quantity demanded. That is, there'll be a movement up and down the demand curve. For number 2, if people's income, when they rise, there's a change in demand for automobiles. Demand curve is going to be shifted to the right. Pepsi is a substitute good for Coke. So when the price of Coke rises, there's a change in demand for Pepsi. Finally, if the prices of computers fall, there's a change in the quantity demanded. It's movement along the demand curve. We can look at supply. The price of a good or service affects the quantity firms plan to sell. The quantity supplied of a good or service is the amount that firms plan to sell during a given time period at a particular price.